Yeah, let's. I mean, there's two things I want to talk about. I want to stay on this. I do want to get to the so-called climate gate, email gate, whatever that was.
Sure.
But I want to stay on this topic because I think Boehlert ultimately, and he was from upstate New York here. He ultimately, I think, decided not to run again because I think he saw that within his own party he was getting that type of pushback. In fact, Christine Todd Woodman, she said to me that she thought the reason why there's been diminished, and studies show, I think there was a Yale survey that showed that the number of people who actually now perceive climate change to be a function of man has actually gone down in the past 3 or 4 years. She claimed that it was a function of the flipness of people who promote climate change science. And rather than getting into, talking about Christine Todd Whitman, because I don't even know how one replies to something like that.
Right.
But what is it? What needs to be done? I mean, why has this change happened? There's no less science. In fact, there's more science than there was.
And I think I caught that segment. I think it was on the Chris Hayes show.
Exactly.
I caught the segment. I was very surprised when she said that.
Yeah, you should have seen us during the break.
Nothing could be further from the truth. There are, of course, advocates on both sides of the debate who are, have their own agenda. But in terms of the fundamental science and scientists who are speaking out about this, we're simply talking about what the scientific evidence shows and what implications it has. And, I don't see my role as a climate scientist to prescribe policy. I'm not telling policymakers they should pass a carbon tax or they should pass cap and trade. I'm happy to leave that to the politicians and the will of the people they represent. But I do believe that scientists have a role in making sure that debate, that policy debate, that worthy debate about what to do about the problem is informed by an honest discussion of what the scientific evidence shows. And unfortunately, in the comments that Governor Whitman made, it sounded like she was actually confusing two different things. Advocating for an honest discussion of the science and what the scientific evidence holds and what its implications are, which I don't think any scientist should apologize for, and policy advocacy, which is not what people like me, what my colleagues are doing. So I do think that she drew a false equivalence between those two things. And it's unfortunate because otherwise she's been a very positive voice within her party, the Republican Party, when it comes to this issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think it seems to me that there is something almost inherently that scientists are at an inherent disadvantage because despite the fact that the conservative movement would have us believe that you're all in this because of the huge riches you're making by coming to these conclusions and these cottage industries that you have and whatnot. The fact is that there's a tremendous amount of resources on the side of confusing and muddying the waters.
Yep.
And that is their job. I mean, they are trained at this, and whereas scientists are trained to do science.
Right. In fact, they're so good at it that they've managed to convince the public that, it's the scientists, it's us who have some well-funded machine behind us when, in fact, we all live quite modestly. Our grant money doesn't go into our pockets. It helps support our research programs so that we can, fund students and publish papers. So there's this mythology that's been created by our detractors that somehow scientists are gaining personally from this. That somehow climate science is a love fest, and we're all just trying to reinforce each other's findings about the reality of climate change, when in fact it's far more like science is a contact sport. Okay, as one colleague of mine put it. You get three of us in a room, and it'll be hard to get us to agree about anything because the way you get ahead in science isn't by proving the other person right. It's by proving the other person wrong, by finding something new that we didn't know. And so the incentive structure in science is to actually is to try to find the things that don't make sense, to try to explain the anomalies, not to simply reinforce the prevailing, paradigm. So the other side has been very effective in completely fooling the public about, the way science works, what the incentive is as a scientist, and it's ironic because the other side, as I detail in my book, I was very interested to learn who are these people who are attacking me, who are trying to smear me, who are subjecting me to legal assaults. Where's this coming from? And as I followed the trail, it inevitably led back to a small number of conservative think tanks, like the Koch brothers, the KOCH, Koch brothers, like the SCAFE foundations, certain conservative foundations and groups that are allied with the fossil fuel industry, who are essentially waging a massive campaign to try to smear my climate scientist colleagues and me, to try to fool the public about the reality of the problem, so that will hopefully, as far as they're concerned, just bury our heads in the sand rather than act now. And ultimately, I have a 6-year-old daughter. My Republican friends, as much as my Democratic friends, I don't imagine for a moment that they don't care equally about the world that we leave our children and grandchildren. So it shouldn't be a partisan political issue. It's about making the right decisions now so that we don't leave our children and grandchildren a degraded planet. And it's hard to understand how there can be a partisan divide on that issue.
Yeah, well, I think at the end, you're right. There are forces out there that do have an incentive to muddy these waters, and it's an economic incentive, of course. And when you talk about the skepticism, that's almost the definition of science.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All scientists should be skeptics, true skeptics. That means, when subject to a new finding or new claim, you examine it, you scrutinize it, and you look for the holes. But you do so in an equal-sided way. And a lot of those who would like to call themselves skeptics are nothing of the sort, because they are willing to attempt to attack and discredit mainstream scientific findings like the greenhouse effect, which is 2-century-old science. It's fundamental physics and chemistry, despite what you might hear from those looking to attack the science. And so they're willing to attack basic physics, established physics and chemistry, with the flimsiest of arguments that don't stand up to the slightest bit of scrutiny. Now, that's not skepticism. That's one-sided skepticism or contrarianism, or in its worst form, what I call denial. And I think you have to call a spade a spade. Those who are attempting to deny established science are deniers. They don't like the term. They'd like to be called skeptics, but they're not skeptics. They're deniers.
And let's just, I want to touch on this. In 2009, there were the University of East Anglia, the climatic research unit was, the emails were hacked. And your emails were fairly prominent in the attempts to discredit climate science
right.
across the board. Just tell us about that episode.
Yeah, well, the most remarkable thing is that it was an email that wasn't written by me and wasn't about me that was most used to try to discredit me, and that gives you some idea of how dishonest an endeavor this was. And so, I don't think it's coincidental that this all took place just weeks before the Copenhagen summit of December 2009, the first real opportunity in years to make meaningful progress on dealing with the problem of climate change. And in the weeks leading up to that summit, there was this criminal, there was this release of stolen, of criminally, obtained emails, thousands of emails between climate scientists around the world, and they were selectively leaked and quoted, cherry-picked, and quotes and phrases strung together in a way that didn't even appear in the emails to try to make it sound like climate scientists were cooking the data, like climate change was indeed the elaborate hoax that people like James Inhofe of Oklahoma would like us to believe. And so this all played out just weeks before the Copenhagen summit, and it was almost certainly used as an attempt to distract the public and policymakers to take their eye off the ball at this critical moment in history. And, it potentially set us back years in terms of confronting this problem. And every year we wait, every year where we do nothing to bring our emissions to a peak and begin bringing them down, it makes it that much more difficult to stabilize greenhouse gas levels below dangerous levels. And so there's a real cost. There's a real cost not just to us, but to the planet in these attempts to distract the public, to delay action, and to commit us to greater and greater amounts of climate change.
And so I should say that not only do you outline this the so-called the ClimateGate emails and contextualize them in your book, but there were 3 separate independent investigations that basically said there's nothing here. Is that right? British Parliament.
That's wrong, Sam. That's wrong. There were 8 investigations now, including the National Science Foundation's Investigator General, Inspector General, the highest authority in the country when it comes to matters of scientific misconduct. And they specifically looked at all of the claims that climate change deniers were making about me and others, and they said that there's nothing to them. These are fabricated accusations and allegations. But you know what? It took 2 years, 2.5 years for that to play out. And in the meantime, those looking to discredit us and the science achieved their goal of sidetracking the discussion of climate change for years, of scuttling not only any possibility of progress at Copenhagen, but of scuttling any serious attempt to deal with the problem of climate change in the U.S. Congress as well. And, to me, some people have said, well, isn't that a crime against humanity, what they're doing? My view is it's more than that. It's a crime against the planet. It's a new sort of crime because what they are doing is basically leading us astray and preventing us from taking the actions that we need to be taking now to make sure that we don't leave future generations a fundamentally degraded planet.
Is there room in the discussion? Is there a space for a new version of the hockey stick graph? Is there another? I mean, what is there an opportunity to get to take that back, or is it simply something that is going to take something more than an argument, more than an icon, more than a movie, let's say, that it's simply going to be people are just going to have to start realizing that when we start to see massive droughts in the middle of this country, let's say, and we start getting more and more marches that are like May used to be, and June used to be.
And our Mays are going to be like July used to be, and our Julys, there's no analog for what they're going to be like if we continue on this path. No, you're absolutely right, and I think that you alluded to this earlier, that as scientists and as those trying to communicate the science, sometimes we tend to make the incorrect assumption that the only thing that's preventing us from breaking through, from communicating the nature of the threat, is the information, that if we just throw enough facts at people, that they'll get it. And unfortunately, I don't think that's necessarily true because we're just trying to barnstorm through that front door with facts. And in many cases, the front door is closed and it's bolted, and people are not some of those who believe that this is a hoax, that that it's a manufactured problem, climate change. I don't believe they're coming at it from a rational point of view or a factually based point of view. I think they're coming at it from in many cases, an ideological point of view. Right. If you accept the reality of climate change, then at some level you have to accept the fact that there are hidden costs of our current reliance on fossil fuels, and that somehow we need to build into the economy the damage that our reliance on fossil fuels is doing to the planet. So if you accept that, then it forces you at some level to accept the need for some sort of regulation of our carbon emissions. And for those who ideologically are opposed to any such attempts to regulate, corporate behavior, they've already decided they have to be against it. And so they're going to work back to find the facts, the quote-unquote facts that they need to try to justify their position. And that's not the way it should be. You look at the facts first,
right,
and hopefully that informs your policy decisions. You don't start with the policy and work backward to figure out what the science has to be to justify it, and how much you need to contort what the science actually says. And I think those who deny climate change are doing that. They're attempting to distort and contort the scientific evidence to suit an ideological agenda.
I mean, I have to say, it's very rare you hear an argument against the idea that the planet is warming that is framed around the notion of this is why the scientists are wrong because of X, Y, and Z. It always involves there has to be some type of secret cabal, and these scientists are willfully, because there's no. It's a much harder thing to argue that in some fashion the actual science is wrong. Tell us what percentage of climate scientists, because the polling of this is really rather disturbing. But tell us what percentage of climate scientists, to the extent that that can be measured, which I think is fairly easy to measure, actually, what percent subscribe to this notion that we are in a crisis mode with the amount of carbon that we're putting into the atmosphere?
Well, at some level, crisis, is potentially a value-laden term, and so it's hard to address that specifically from a scientific point of view.
All right. Well, then let me rephrase that in a less flip way, so that if the governor is listening, she will be able to accept this. That the increase in carbon beyond the 350 parts per million, which is considered a tipping point, is a man-made, is a function of human activity.
No, I knew what you were getting at. And, so the proposition that we are warming the planet noticeably and changing the climate noticeably, and that we will see far larger impacts and potentially quite detrimental impacts if we proceed on this course, that is not legitimately contested in the scientific community. So I'm here at a meeting in Vienna of the European Geophysical Union, thousands of scientists from Europe and the U.S. and other countries who get together every year to talk about the latest, developments in the science. And, and I've been attending talks. Nobody is debating whether no scientists are debating whether the planet is warming or whether increasing greenhouse gas concentrations are responsible for it, or whether humans are responsible for those increases in greenhouse gas concentrations. That's not what scientists are debating. What we're debating is what will be the impact on, for example, hurricanes in the Atlantic Ocean, and how much warming. We know we're going to get a certain amount of warming, but precisely how much warming will we get, and what's the impact going to be on rainfall patterns in, Pennsylvania? I mean, there are areas of the science where we don't have certain answers, and scientists are still debating and working out the science and trying to figure these things out. But there's literally, no debate within the scientific community about whether humans are warming the planet by burning fossil fuels and increasing the greenhouse gas concentrations. But if you listen to the public discourse on this issue, you would come to the, conclusion that the scientific community is divided on this issue. And it just speaks to how effective the campaign to deny the science of climate change has been, that they've been able to take an issue where there is about as much, agreement as you'll ever find on a scientific issue within among the scientists around the world. The U.S. National Academy of Sciences, founded by Abraham Lincoln, a Republican president, I might add, or the national academies of all the major industrial nations, all the G8 nations, are all on record as saying that climate change is real and the impacts could potentially be quite damaging, and we need to do something about it. But you would never gather that from the public discussion that we're still having in the U.S.
Indeed. Michael Mann, the author of The Hockey Stick and the Climate Wars, thank you so much for joining us.